and how that might translate into supporting you guys and your different work that you're doing, if any of you are interested. So I'm just going to share my screen and provide a short presentation on NEF, just to organize myself more than anything, so I don't just ramble on. So just bear with me. Great, can everyone see that okay?
Yeah.
Thanks, Liz. Okay, so NEF is a, if it ever actually moves to next slide. Oh, there we go. Okay, so NEF is a independent and impartial national charity. We are based in Milton Keynes. We've done a lot of our work around the sort of Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire, Hertfordshire area, and we have very good relationships with lots of major stakeholders throughout those regions. We was established in 1988, so we've sort of had 30 years working in this sector, at the forefront of improving the use of energy in buildings. And even more so now than ever, we're starting to think not just about the buildings, but the people that occupy those buildings and how we can support them to live sort of warmer, healthier, happier lives by improving the energy efficiency and warmth of that. We work with multiple different stakeholders that all have interest in the sector, and it's an ever-growing list as we sort of learn and continue delivering the types of projects we do. We work with community groups, the general public. We have lots of forward front-facing models where we directly engage with members of the public and support them to access different types of interventions around energy efficiency and fuel poverty and so on, which I'll talk to you a bit more about in a moment. And we have lots of good relationships with local authorities and government bodies. We deliver a lot of services on behalf of local authorities, and often work with them to implement different things like fuel poverty services, like eco schemes. There's the eco flexible eligibility that some of you might be familiar with. We deliver and run a lot of schemes like that for those clients, and even more so recently we've began working a lot with the supply chain itself, and that's sort of a direct correlation with the sort of funding that's out there at the moment to support energy efficiency upgrades such as eco funding, eco flexible funding, and the Green Homes Grant. At the moment we're delivering 3 different consortium contracts for Green Homes grants, and we're working directly with the supply chain and installers and retrofit coordinators on that. Through our initial discussions with Community Energy South, we've really sort of picked up on that there's a couple of our projects that would fit probably quite nicely with what you're doing and what some of you as community energy groups are doing, and that you might need support or solutions for. One of them is called Better Housing, Better Health. So this is our fuel poverty service. It's delivered across about 10 local authority areas now, and it's a sort of ever expanding service. And really this is about supporting low income households and vulnerable people. So taking into account all the different nuances and reasons that somebody might find themselves in fuel poverty, and trying to think about the different interventions that might support that person to access advice and guidance and funding to help them live a warmer, better life. And we try and do that on a basis where there's no cost to that household. So everything within this service is free. It's all managed by expert project officers, and it's done really on a sort of hand-holding basis and helping that person through the journey, direct referrals into different partners, and just trying to manage that from the sort of front end to the end of the customer journey, where we can ensure that there's a successful outcome at the end of it. So yeah, that focuses on a whole wide range of things. So it's energy efficiency. Yes, we help people improve their homes. but we're looking at the bigger picture of fuel poverty within that service. And the other one is super homes. So super homes supports self-funding homeowners, the able to pay market, and landlords to improve the comfort and energy efficiency of their homes. My colleague Sandra Hayes is here today, and she will be talking a bit later on, and will explain this in a lot more detail than what I can, and put it into some actual deliverable context in terms of working with a community energy group to implement super homes. But it provides expertise and guidance on the best practice for retrofit and delivers bespoke whole house plans. Really, what we're thinking about today is making links with you, introducing ourselves to you, and talking to you about how we can support you more. So we want to be having discussions with the wider sort of community energy groups under Community Energy South, talking to you about how you might be able to access these services and supports that we offer, finding out about your needs to access national government funding. I've mentioned eco funding, Green Homes Grant. There's more in the pipeline, such as Home Upgrades Grant, and this is the government, really making their push towards net zero, and starting to put millions and millions of pounds behind different funding schemes. There's lots of them out there. There's lots of them come. They all have different eligibility criteria, scheme managers, managing agents, local authorities involved. We try and provide that expertise to help people access that and facilitate those conversations. And also we can lead on applications to those funds to deliver it locally as well. We can support you with project funding. So as I said at the start, the main ask for Community Energy South was coming to us and talking to us about the redress pot. We've been successful with redress funding for both working with energy groups, and so, as I said, Sandra will talk to you about a project that we've successfully won with members of CES that's on the ground now. We've also been successful in applying to redress to expand our fuel poverty services. So we've gone to them, said that there's a need in this area to expand the service, provide a free helpline, and then through that we've been and demonstrating partnerships and buy-in from local stakeholders, we've been able to then expand that service and then take referrals from a wider field. So yeah, it's really about we can access and facilitate access to funding, but yeah, we need you to come to us, have conversations, show us your support, and then we can help put together hopefully a successful application. And then, as I mentioned, we're starting to work more and more with installers and starting to build that supply chain and building some expertise in that field, which we know is going to be a real important part of sort of taking forward all of this retrofit that we're all so keen on. That's it for me, really. So if there's any questions, I don't know if we want to do questions now or at the end, Liz. I don't know what the normal format is, if there's anything popped up in chat, but I will share some further information in chat about who to go to and where to contact. I think I've already copied it. So, and some further details on our websites and impact reports and stuff like that, if anybody else would like to do some further reading up on any, but it's all there.
Thank you, Matt. I don't know that there have been many questions come up yet in the chat box. I have questions, but I can ask those at the end. I think what we should do is have the other presentations and then go through to the questions and answers. Kate and Sandra, I think it would make more sense if Sandra were to follow on from Matt. Is that okay with both of you, given that's not what we spoke about earlier? Okay,
yeah,
so
that's fine.
Great. Let's hear a little bit more about one of Neff's what I think is quite exciting projects that you've managed to get going with one of our groups.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. So I'm Sandra Hayes. I'm the Director of Development at National Energy Foundation, and I'm working a lot on our sort of super home projects. What I wanted to talk to you all about is the project that we're working on with actually two groups, two community groups, so WINAC and PCAN. And we are working in partnership, delivering a project, sort of piloting whole house retrofits in those two communities. And the project is being funded by the Redress Fund, which is managed by Energy Saving Trust, which is basically fines from energy companies who've breached the rules in some way. And I think, you know, this project only started on the 1st of May, but I think it's a sort of successful model in terms of we, as you heard from Matt, we are a charity, we're independent, but we've been established since 1988. So we've got a track record of putting in funding applications. So we sort of put this, we obviously had lots of discussions with the two groups beforehand, but we put this bid in together with them, and we're the sort of lead, and we have taken on the responsibility for the sort of managing the fund, and also the reporting. The project's due to go for 2 years, and we have got basically we're piloting a whole house retrofit service based on our super homes model. So the sort of the customer journey is that it starts off with obviously with an initial inquiry from homeowners. We organised, and we've actually done this, we've actually procured ourselves some retrofit coordinators to go to each person's home and do a whole house retrofit plan. The customer then can get go to installers, get quotes for work, and to become a super home as part of our sort of project model, you have to be monitored and evaluated for a 12-month period. So actually the whole super homes model and certification which we give to people at the end is all based on measured energy performance. It's not just, you know, what we think is going to happen in practice. So we're quite early days in this project. We've done some initial whole house plans for customers, particularly in the Petersfield area, and we're sort of working it through. And because it's a pilot, you know, there's things that we need to sort of get right in terms of, you know, the presentation of the plan to customers to make sure it's user friendly. But the partnership really is about us sort of providing the methodology for doing this, and, you know, doing the procurement, as I said, managing the reporting and the finances, and the community groups are there on the ground, talking to their members, doing the recruitment of people locally. You know, we've been fortunate enough with Redress to get funding to help cover the cost of the whole house retrofit plans, or at least in part, because we've looked at, you know, obviously there are some people for whom the cost, which is £500, is just not affordable. So we have got subsidies for families who are on low income, or even if, you know, if they're particularly struggling, they can get things done for free. We've also got some funding for some of the retrofit measures, so that there is funding for people on low income for solar panels, for example, and also for potentially any sort of remedial work that can't be funded through another source, or, you know, it's a bit additional work. Maybe it might be about, I don't know, draft proofing, or it might be, you know, putting in better heating controls perhaps. So I think it's been a very, I mean, so far it's been quite exciting. I think one of the things as well, I think it's worth noting is, one of the problems sometimes with going for grant funding is cash flow, particularly for a community group. And, you know, with redress funding, I don't know about, obviously lots of other fundings might be similar, but with the redress funding, we have to report on a quarterly basis. And then we report on a quarterly basis, and then EST have up to, I can't remember if it's 30 or 90 days after that to actually pay us. So, but you can see that there's a long gap between incurring the cost and getting paid for it. And one of the things that, you know, we've been able to do for PCAM particularly is we've come to an agreement with them to help them with their cash flow, so that they're not having to wait as long as we're having to wait for their payments. And what it's also meant for them is that for the very first time, they've been able to employ a member of staff, because there's no doubt about it that projects like this do take up a lot of time, and it's all volunteer time, what has been up till recently. So I think, you know, us being able to give them that confidence and that cash flow from the start of the project has enabled them to recruit someone to actually help them get this project off the ground. So it's very exciting. It's still quite early days, and we are busy now perfecting what we want the whole house plan to look like. But I think it's it's very useful, and you know, one of the outcomes is that we are hoping that, you know, we've kind of got this a little bit more, if the customer journey smoothed out a little bit more, is that we want to work with other community groups on this same kind of model. At the moment, obviously, there's not funding from the Risk Redress project to do that, but I think there are pots of money available to community groups, maybe not the same size as Redress. It's just actually having something that you want to deliver with that funding. So Super Homes is all about domestic retrofit. So I see a question in the chat about schools and other buildings. But it is very much about domestic. So we're working very much with sort of local householders. I think that's probably enough for me now. If people have got questions, obviously I'm very happy to answer them afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. That was really interesting. There are quite a lot of questions coming up for you. I'm just wondering if we should. No, I think let's plough on and give our presentations, just in case they provoke more questions, and then we'll go to the Q&A. So I would like to invite Kate Meakin from Energise Sussex Coast to speak now. She has many fans here in this session. Ollie cheering her on, and a couple of other people have said in the chat box what a star you are, Kate. I think you've
nice way to start.
Well, I think you've mentored quite a few people here, and you've got bags and bags and heaps of experience of being an energy champion, so welcome, and I'll hand over.
Thank you. So I'm going to share the highs and lows of my experience as an energy champion. So I have been working for Energise Sussex Coast. We're based in St Leonard's, and we're a community energy cooperative. I've been working for them for about 5 years, and I've been an energy champion for about 4 of those years. At the moment, I manage our energy advice service, but I also continue to deliver some of the energy champion advice myself. And I'll probably always do that because I really do like it so much. So I'm a good advert for why it's nice to be an energy champion. So before I did this job, my interest and background was I used to work for various NGOs in sort of campaigns and environmental campaigning, so like Oxfam, Sustrans, that type of organisation. And I've also always been a member of Transition Towns, so some of you might be as well. So my sort of interest in this type of world is what we can do about climate change and sort of doing sort of practical actions that really make a difference. So I try to remember how I became an energy champion, but I think it's just from being in a small organisation, we ended up, everyone just has to do everything. So I think I first of all was doing outreach on stalls and talking to people, and then slowly started to talk about tariff switching and the warm home discount, and then sort of became an energy champion by accident, just because I started it. So just to reassure anyone that's new to it, that you don't need, lots and lots of knowledge. You don't need to be a technical person. It is something that you can learn about, and you start, and then it's really something you learn as you do it. At that time, we were working on an EU-funded community engagement project called Climate Active Neighbourhoods, and also the government-funded Big Energy Saving Network. So at that time, we used to be out and about all of the time. So it was all community engagement. And we realised quite quickly that energy issues are at the bottom of a long list for most people. So sort of locking yourself away in a town hall and advertising it and hoping that people will come and speak to you about the bills didn't really work. So quickly we learned that we have to go to the places where people are. What are the community spaces that are already being really well used? Let's go there and we'll take our service to them. So at that time, we used to go to the library, we'd go to the town hall where people were paying their bills, we'd go to the food bank, we'd link in with community events, so festivals, we'd have stalls there. We would go to lunch clubs, older people lunch clubs, whatever activities were going on of other groups, like the Chinese Association were having a lunch, we went along to that. So we really tried to think about taking our service to the people we wanted to help rather than expect people to come to us. And we thought of as many fun activities as we could. So we had some lovely workshops like, you know, those sausage dog draft excluders. We had that as a workshop. So we'd go along to women's groups like the WI and we'd take that workshop along. And as we were doing the workshop, it'd be a really nice chance to talk to people about energy saving, tariff switching, warm home discount, but, you know, have those sort of more informal conversations. John, I see you asked how we're funded. Currently, we're funded by the Big Energy Saving Network, British Gas Energy Trust, and UK Power Networks Power Partners funding, so multiple. And as Sandra said, it's hard work getting the funding. So if NEF are offering support with that, then that sounds really good. So personally, in terms of talking about a high, I really loved the community engagement part. You know, if you like meeting people and chatting to people, then you'll really like being an energy champion. But it wasn't just a one-way thing. So as I said, when I started, I didn't have a background in this, you know, in energy advice or advice work generally. So it was a two-way thing. So I'd meet people, you know, we'd be out at, say, the summer fair, and I start talking to a real sort of techie, geeky, you know, like the people that love solar and air source heat pumps, and actually learned a huge lot of information from those people as well. So I think it's nice, you know, it's a nice two-way exchange of information doing those type of outreach things. And so at this point, when we were delivering the service this way, it was quite light touch. We were doing the sort of big energy saving network basics. So we were switching suppliers, we were accessing the warm home, supporting people to access the warm home discount. We were adding people to the priority services register. It's, you know, we were meeting someone and we were just having quite a short conversation and doing those type of things and maybe talking to them for 10, 15 minutes. And the service was delivered in this way for a few years. It was seasonal. So it was basically autumn, winter and early spring. And that had its difficulties because we'd have some great people, great energy champions. And then at the end of the season, we'd lose some of them because obviously people need to work. With our service, we've always paid people as well as having volunteer champions. And so I'd say that's been a problem ongoing with this sort of seasonal work. Luckily, it's something we've managed to overcome now. We've secured funding that's year round, and that's made a big difference. We had a great project called the Energy Caravan project, and that's when we've got an electric van. We were able to take that into communities that we weren't reaching before, so rural communities, isolated housing estates, for example. And then I'm going to get up to the low point that we've all gone through. COVID happened. And everything that we were doing was face-to-face. So every single thing that we were doing came to a stop. And, you know, I'm sure lots of you experienced the same thing. So I went on furlough. We all went on furlough. The one person that carried on working, we managed to get an agreement that their funding could be used to help the food bank get food out. You know, so it was a massive shock to our organisation and how we were working. So, however, over summer, we sort of regrouped and we thought about how we could deliver this service now, you know, as it was last year during the lockdowns. And what we did is we set up our own energy advice helpline. And we talked to all those community organisations that we'd been working with over the years. And we set up referral pathways so they could refer directly to us. And we'd call the client and we'd have a telephone appointment with them. And actually, it was another high point because this service really took off. It worked really, really well. And actually, we enjoyed those telephone appointments because rather than having a sort of 10-minute chat, you know, at a busy event with lots of other stuff going on, we were able to talk to people when they were at home. They put aside the time for the appointment. They had all their information, which is great. If any of you are champions, you'll know what I mean. Half the time people haven't got their bills or access to the stuff they need to have access to. So actually those telephone appointments worked really, really well. And it felt really rewarding, because rather than do one thing, you know, get them on a cheaper tariff, we were able to look at every single thing we could do for them and, you know, do a lot more per person. That was fantastic. However, it also came with a low point, which was, for a lot of people, this was during the lockdown, we were the only one that they were talking to. So all of us as energy advisors, you know, none of us have a mental health background. And we were talking to people that were incredibly anxious, depressed, scared, totally isolated. We had people crying on the phone. I had someone suicidal on the phone. So, you know, in terms of, we didn't quite feel prepared for this, these type of interactions. You know, it wasn't what we've been doing so far. And suddenly we really faced with the sort of mental health crisis that happened during the lockdowns. And we didn't feel quite qualified to deal with that. So as an organisation, what we did, we worked with a mental health professional that we've known over the years, and we've developed some training for energy advisors about mental health. So if any of you are running energy advice programs, we now offer that training as well for energy advisors, so that all of us can feel really sort of prepared for those type of interactions. And now we run a hybrid model. So we're back to doing the community outreach, which is great. And we all really love that face-to-face interaction, but we have continued with the telephone appointments. And because we've set up those referral pathways, we still get lots and lots of referrals for telephone appointments. And it continues to work really, really well. We will always do that now. And I just wanted to give a couple of sort of case study examples of people that just stood out in my mind. So one woman is called Jaina Bear, and she was referred to us from the food bank. And this was during lockdown 1, and she was at a moment of personal crisis because her marriage had broken down, her husband had left, she had 3 children, one of them was disabled, and she owned her own house but was receiving universal credit. And unfortunately, universal credit just doesn't give you enough to cover sort of ongoing maintenance costs or your mortgage even. So her boiler was broken. So not only had she not had hot water and she hadn't had heating for 2 months, the boiler was also leaking all over the kitchen. So her kitchen was falling into a state of disrepair, and her own mental health was suffering. She was, extremely anxious, extremely stressed, and it was all sort of compounded and symbolized by this boiler, which was just causing her such problems. So we did the easy win thing. So we accessed her the warm home discount, made sure she was on the priority services register. We were able to provide an emergency payment for her bill as well, but the most important thing we could do for her, we managed to get her a new boiler. And for her, it wasn't just having hot water, which is obviously incredibly important, especially if she had children, and heating, but it stopped that leak into her kitchen, and it just brought back that feeling of control. So it really was quite life-changing for her, because it had become this symbol of every single thing going wrong, and actually it just brought back that control, as well as the really important things of having hot water and heat. And then another person, totally different type of person. So this was a man in his 70s. He was on a state pension. He still did a bit of work to top up his state pension. He was on a low income, but he didn't receive any sort of benefits. And he was very, very proud. So he'd never had debt in his life. He'd never received any support in his life. But he'd been paying his bills as normal. And then he received a demand for over £1,000 from EDF. So he couldn't understand it. He was really distressed by it. He felt like he was in debt and he didn't know why. He'd never been in debt in his life. It was quite a difficult one to understand. He couldn't send emails, so he couldn't send me the bills. He couldn't do photos on his phone, so he couldn't send me photos of the phone. So I went over to his house and had a look at these bills. And what we found out was that his smart meter that he'd had installed a few years ago wasn't working, and it had just been registering that he used a few kilowatt hours of gas every month. And so he'd been delighted when EDF had written to him a couple of years ago to say, we're putting your direct debit down to £6 a month for your gas. And he thought, wow, you know, what an amazing deal. EDF are giving me like £6 a month. You know, and he had no idea because he had a smart meter installed, he'd done all the right thing. And then at some point along the way, EDF had picked up that something was wrong with his meter, and they'd gone and inspected it, repaired it, and then he'd got this massive catch-up bill. And just by good coincidence, I'd read somewhere about the Ofgem rules that they can't back bill beyond a year ago. So one sort of thing is being an energy champion, so much of this you learn on the job. So I'd happened to read this, then I spoke to him, and I happened to pick up that, okay, a lot of this bill must be from a few years ago. It wasn't his fault, you know, they put in a smart meter. The smart meter was providing the readings. So I supported him to write a letter of complaint. We wrote one together, and I backed it up, and we put about the Ofgem ruling. And then I'm really pleased to say they refunded him. He'd already paid that £1,000 because he didn't like to be in debt, and they refunded him £775. So it was just a really nice feeling because he was delighted. He was so stressed by the idea of this debt. He'd used his savings, which he didn't have much of. So it was just a nice example of how, as we go along as energy champions, you learn stuff on the job, and then, you know, you bring that knowledge in and can help people more. And so finally, just to end on the reasons that I like being an energy champion, I really like the fact that you get to make this immediate difference. So you can access things like the warm home discount or fuel vouchers, and they make this really immediate difference. So in terms of being able to help someone, you can do something and straight away that you've made you know, a substantial difference. But then you can do these longer term things, which is about accessing funding for energy efficiency things. So you haven't just helped them that month, you've actually helped them access measures that are going to help them year on year on year. And importantly for us as an organisation, then you've got the environmental benefits of doing this and the carbon saving benefits of doing this. And then finally, I just really enjoy the interaction with the clients. You know, you meet a whole range of really interesting people. You have these really nice, friendly engagements and chats and moments of connection. And I'd say for me, that's probably the main reason that I really like being an energy champion. So happy to take any questions, and yeah, nice to speak to you today.
Thank you very much, Kate. That was quite heartwarming. I see we've got a question from Dinah, but Dinah, and thumbs up from Ollie. It really was so heartwarming and lovely to hear about what a real impact energy champions and energy champion volunteers can make in people's lives. Yeah, as particularly at this time with everything going so crazy, with gas prices and things. Dinah, I'm going to hold off on your question because we've got one more speaker, which is Alison Zaraki from Sustainable Overton, who has been mentored by Kate, I have to say, but also they are, I can't think of the right word, but they are quite inspiring in their own right in Sustainable Overton. So they have gone from, I can't remember, they've set up their community energy group very recently, and I think they've already got 7 energy champions. So I thought we should really get Alison to come along and tell us how to go from 0 to 60 so quickly.
Thanks, Liz. Right, I'll just share my screen.
Okay, thank you.
Hold on a second. Okay. Right, that should. There we go. Right, so I've just put a few slides together to sort of take you through our energy champion journey so far. So Overton, for those of you that don't know, we're a small village. We're just west of Basingstoke. So Our journey so far is that we set up our climate emergency group a couple of years ago, and energy obviously is one of the biggest things that you can make a difference with. So we're just in the middle of doing our, we've set up a test source community energy. So we're doing a solar rooftop project. But then at the beginning of the year, as I was dealing with Community Energy South, they suggested that this could be a good idea. So I talked to Kate, and realised that there was, we could get free funding to do this thing called energy championing, which really fitted with the things that we were trying to do. So we wanted people, ideally we wanted them to switch to green, but we're also happy to help on the social side. We were really keen to look at grants and funding, and we have a really old housing stock here in Overton, and it's a massive problem for those people like myself in very old houses which just leak heat. And we don't often know what advice we should give people. People find it very difficult to do. So we'd started using thermal imaging cameras, which we'd lent out to help people, but often people don't really know quite then what to do with that information. So this came at a really fortuitous time, and because it's seasonal, we thought it was perfect if we could just get people trained up the beginning of the year, that we could, have a bit of a practice, and then we'd be ready for this coming season. And the other thing is, as I've realised running a volunteer group, is that people really do appreciate having proper training and support. A lot of what we do is very seat of the pants, and you need to be really careful with this kind of advice. You can't be giving people advice that is incorrect. As I've now realised, in a house, you have to get the right ventilation. You can get damp, and the information out there, although there's brilliant websites, it's actually quite complicated, and a lot of it is very expensive. And I think people just get paralysed and just don't know where to turn. So this really floated my boat. So I thought this sounded perfect. So I then thought, right, let's just try and recruit as many people as we possibly can. So basically, I just hit everything I could possibly think of. We have a newsletter that goes out to all of our houses. We put information in there saying there was free training, and Kate had kindly, because it was COVID, had decided that we could do it online. We could separate the two main areas into an hour and a half of Zoom, and actually it worked really well, I thought. I know it's obviously not the way you're used to doing it, Kate, but I thought it was highly effective, and it was really enjoyable. We did social media, we did our website, we did notice boards. We probably got most of our people from existing volunteers, so things like the parish council, the village agents were really good, because obviously this is their kind of market. Church and other community groups, so people who were already busy but wanted to, this fitted really well with what they're trying to achieve. We had also a couple of members of the general public who decided it was important as well, and we just talked to everyone. We managed to recruit about 9 or 10 people to do the training, but of course with all of these things, they then end up dropping out. So we've ended up with 7 trained champions, which I was pretty pleased with. I was aiming for 10, but 7 is good. So we've launched it properly in August. So here's one of our little banners that we've produced to try and attract people. We have a monthly market now, that post-COVID, that we can actually talk to people and encourage them to bring in their bills. We found it quite hard. It's been really quiet. I don't know whether it's because people just think energy is not high on their agenda, or it's actually been hot, so they're not too worried about it, or they just don't know what tariff they're on, and they're just maybe embarrassed. We have encountered people who, they think they switched very recently, and then you find out it was 6 or 7 years ago, and they've been on a really expensive tariff and they had no idea. Or older people who've just forgotten their login, and they're embarrassed because they can't remember how to get into it, and they don't want to look stupid, or they just think it's too good to be true and we're trying to flog them something. So I think we need to change our approach. I've already suggested that for the one on Saturday, we intersperse. We have many informational stalls. We've got, nappy libraries and repair cafe and other bits and pieces, food champions. So I want to intersperse them all with people who are selling things, so that whilst people are browsing, we can start these little conversations. We've also got other plans now that COVID is sort of, things are opening up a bit. So we're trying to organise talks with the U3A, because I find there's quite a lot of information to impart to people. So as what you were saying before, Kate, about, you know, trying to grab a 5-10 minute conversation with someone, if you can get a group together and just give them more of an understanding, I think it might be easier to hook them in. So, you know, things like coffee mornings would be good. We've tried a workshop. We had one person sign up, so we need a more creative approach to that. Also, I really like what Ollie had done when he had said, I did a workshop with 10 people and I saved them, I don't know, collectively £4,000 a year or something massive. So I want to try and get case studies together to really show how much you really can save. And we could do it on a village basis. You know, our village has saved this amount of money. They could then invest that in our test source community energy and own some energy. The village agents were really good, because they were slightly concerned about role blurring. So I did have to talk through that with them, but they are a very good fit for what we're trying to do, because it's age concern. I've also now hooked up with some people at the local GP surgery, because I found it hard to get anywhere with them because of COVID. They're so busy. But I've now made some contacts where I think, you know, maybe they could do referrals. So I would love it if we could do a helpline. I only need to talk to you offline about that, Kate, because I'm not sure. We might need more manpower for that. Schools, I think that would be a really good thing to do now that possibly we could do some sort of assembly and parent mail communication. And actually what Kate and Liz and I came up with this morning was, you know, there's a lot of people in the village who are volunteers, but they love to sit in the pub and have a beer, and they don't always really deliver things, but they are really passionate about it. So we thought, why not do a sort of informal pub workshop, where if the landlord or landlady was happy, we could, you know, a perfect place to get people. The challenges, we had to really over advertise. There's quite a high dropout rate from advertising, from the training. And even now, of our 7, I struggle to get 1 or 2 to come to the markets. They've always got something else on. So my concern is now, if they don't engage, they will just go off. So that's my next thing, is to try and hook them back in for the season. The other hooks that we found, I mean, at the moment, I think the concern about rising energy prices, the whole thing with the gas prices, there's a lot of concern about when gas boilers are phased out. What about heat pumps? Do they really work? Aren't they too expensive? You know, people are really concerned about saving money, but above all, they want it just to be easy. So if we can try and tick some of those boxes, I think that would be effective. I found it very difficult to identify people in fuel poverty, and the things that we've done so far haven't really borne any fruit. So I'd welcome any help on that. And then the other side, with the insulation side, I would love to end up with a van like you've got, Kate, where we can buy insulation, we can go around, we can actually help people sort these things out. We'd need to recruit a lot more people. But, you know, my vision is that we can insulate our whole village. And I'm really fascinated, Sandra, in what you were saying about your super house. You know, I think we need places people can go where they can see physically, how do you do this insulation? How do you put on these things in the window? You know, how much is it going to cost me? Who can install it? Can I trust them? So I think people have all these worries. So I think the more, you know, and we need to learn too, because, you know, a lot of this is very new for our volunteers. We found the thermal imaging camera really, really useful, actually. People got quite excited about that. So we wondered if we could do a basic training course, or find a training course, and maybe find a service. A lot of people find this too difficult to use. They look at the picture. I mean, that's my little house there on the left, and they don't know what it means. They don't know how to, there's no insulation in that tiny loft. They don't know how to solve it. So we need to try and bridge that gap between knowing what the problem is and then helping them solve it. And then just a couple of other things we've done. We did a energy conservation communication to everyone. You know, let's just try and all cut down. Could we all cut down what we're using? I think a lot of us waste energy where we don't need to. And then we did a one about saving money on your bills and staying warm, and trying to give some basic information. So hopefully those were of use. And this was just a really nice little thing that one of our volunteers said. I cannot overstate the importance of being part of a community on a mission, which I really liked, because a lot of the volunteers are really concerned about, you know, how we're going to get out of this mess that we're in. So there are people out there that really want to help. So I feel it's my role to try and rope them in and all work together. So very happy to answer any questions. I've probably got more questions than I have answers, but hopefully together we can solve it.
Thank you very much, Alison.
Thank you.
We have got quite a lot of questions, and likewise you will be very welcome to ask questions too. But before we launch into all our questions, I'm just going to hand over to Ollie, who is the person who really introduced me to being the whole notion of energy champions. And I know Ollie has a passion or a strong place in his heart for this sort of work. So Ollie, I've just thought I'd hand over to you to sum up.
Well, thank you very much, Liz. And I won't keep you for long because there's lots of questions to answer. I'm sure it's going to be a good discussion. But, you know, Kate, what you're doing at Energise Sussex Coast over the last 5 years, you know, with the team in Hastings is amazing. And you provided a massive service for thousands of homes and a lot of people who have been in debt and had issues. So, you know, big kudos to Energise Sussex Coast, and thank you for sharing that with other groups. And
Thanks,
also,
Ollie. That's very nice.
In South East London, and to the team at Sustainable Overton and Ali, you know, you're on a journey, and I believe in line with COP26, you're going to launch your first share offer as well for a solar scheme. So, you know, to do energy champion work in Overton and the Test Valley, to build, you know, your reputation as an organisation and support means that you can also start generating renewable energy. So, you know, what a good example, and starting on the journey. So, and I think for people starting on this journey, you know, both Kate and Ali at Overton, you've got a group that's been going for 10 years and a group that's been going for a year, and it demonstrates how they both work. And then you've got organisations like National Energy Foundation and the Energy Saving Trust that are backing the industry up and giving more expertise. And those show homes are really important. And it can be really good fun being an energy champion, and it can be very bespoke to your community as well, because energy bills, believe it or not, are linked to your postcodes. So it's quite bespoke to your area. So as you build up, you kind of understand, you know, what services there are locally, and you build that up and you can link people, and it's really good. So so thank you very much, and thanks for all the other groups that are joining from the Southeast. And, you know, let's continue on this journey and link up with Kate and Alison and the Community and South team, and we'll try and continue to support that. So thank you, Liz. Over to questions.
Thanks, Ollie. I saw Alison, when you mentioned postcodes and energy bills, I saw Alison look up and look immediately engaged, very engaged. But before we, so she may have a question about that, but I'm just going to go back to the people who asked questions quite early on. So Henry Meller, would you like to unmute yourself if you're muted? You had a question for National Energy Foundation.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm in retrofitting. I think it's already been said about the quality of advice you give or may be given, and the responsibility one has for that. But part of the equation is the type of materials we're using, whether they're sustainable materials, where they're sourced, are they, and looking at the embodied carbon that is involved in the whole process of retrofitting. I hope that's not too woolly a question, but it was something that occurred to me just in the discussion, so I typed in that question.
Thank you. Matt or Sandra, either of you able to answer that?
I had a go answering it in the,
yes, you did,
the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, because at the moment, we are not looking so much at embodied carbon, and when we've got our super homes rating scheme that we've worked on, which is actually like 5 tiers to sort of net zero, we're very conscious of the fact that we'd like to add embodied carbon as an additional tier, but we just feel like we need to get these tiers in alignment first. In terms of the types of materials, obviously there's a lot of concern, particularly about traditional buildings, older buildings, and breathability. We tend not to get involved in that at the moment because the way that we work with super homes is that we're working with the sort of the customer journey that's set out in the government sort of past 2035. So the retrofit coordinator has a really key role in advising the householder. So it would be them that would have that discussion. But if anyone wants more information, I know that the STBA, the Sustainable, Traditional Buildings Alliance, I'm trying to remember, but they have an awful lot of information on sort of natural materials for older buildings. But it's not something that we get ourselves directly involved in at the moment.
Sandra, what was that acronym, please?
STBA. I'm trying to remember what it stands for. It's certainly one part of it is traditional
it's all right. I'll look it up.
Yeah, but they have a lot of concerns about retrofitting and breathability and older properties. Yeah.
I think CAT, the Centre for Alternative Energy, they also, if they have developed or they are developing an information hub, which possibly would feed into that as well.
Even though I had a list of things I was going to say, I'll go to you in just a moment, Stuart. I just wanted to point out, Tom Broughton just asked a question, which I know actually impacts an awful lot of community energy groups. And I know it's a question, for example, that you've been discussing in Community about how you, whether or how one advises on energy, and if there is a forum available for these sorts of discussions. Does anybody know if there are any forums? Nick Owens may know, Stuart Bird may know. Just if you do, please unmute yourself and tell us.
I used to read fairly obsessively a forum called the Green Building Forum. I don't know if anyone else knows it. I'm not sure if it's still going anymore. I can't remember what it was an offshoot of. But it was, obsessive details about how to build green, and endless arguments about various materials. But it would be good if there was perhaps a slightly less technical forum of that nature where people could put in questions, but I'm not aware of any other one. I'd also like to mention the association, the AECB, which is Association of
Environmentally conscious builders.
Thank you.
Building, yeah. So I was going to mention, you talking about forums, is very interesting, because one of the other parts of super homes for us is a membership network, and we had our first event for prospective super home members a couple of days ago. But the idea of that is that we are sort of running webinars on sort of topical issues for it's I suppose at the moment it's mostly targeted at individuals who would be who are interested in doing their own home, but you know, there is a fee because we have to cover our costs, but it is only £50 for the year. But we could certainly look at, you know, topics of interest to anyone involved in this area, not just the individuals, but also people giving advice. I think that would be very interesting to explore that, because I think it's, like you say, the forums can be really good, but actually sometimes doing something on, like I think partly because of COVID now, we're all getting so used to doing these kind of online webinars. It's a kind of a nice in between having to, you know, a physical meeting and actually just something that's purely online and it's all written. So you know, if anyone's got any thoughts on that, I'd be very happy to you know, to hear from you. And I have put my contact details on the chat.
Thank you, Sandra. Okay, so Nick, then Stuart. Nick Owens, then Stuart Bird.
Okay, thank you. I suppose I was going to mention the AECB, but that one's already come up. That one tends to be a bit technical, and it doesn't necessarily have regular meetings, so it's not necessarily a great place to go, but the quality of the information you get there is fabulous. I guess where I'm seeing most scope at the moment is the Warmer Sussex, being a Sussex person, but they have a very good website which enables householders to put in details of their own house and identify what the energy saving measures are. I think it probably also needs a follow-up service. So I intend to get in touch with Warmer Sussex to see what is their scope for follow-up and how can they track people who are looking at their website and you know, contact them and chivvy them on to actually doing something.
I think Warmer Sussex might have finished.
Has it really?
But they've kept that Plan Builder app up there, which is really handy. But I think it might have come to an end.
Oh, I will.
Better try, yeah.
I will go and ask. I'll ask some of them who were in it and see what's going on. Okay, thanks for that.
Stuart, and I know you also had a question as well as an observation to make. You had a question about super homes, but you may need to.
Yes, yes. Well, I think the discussion's moved on a little bit, but the point I was going to make about the embedded carbon, and I know this because my daughter happens to work for Mott MacDonald, and they are specialists in this area. So this is an engineering consultancy, and it is very difficult to work it out for a number of reasons. So there are, I've looked up, there are databases of materials that you can download if you want to do your own analysis. But I think it's at pretty specialist level at the moment. My daughter works with the auto industry, and they have big debates over whether to have steel containers versus concrete, and whether to reuse existing, you know, and it is quite an involved calculation. So at a house level, I guess that's probably, because every circumstance, every building project is different. You have to look at everything you've got, make an assessment of what you've got, compare it with the alternatives, you know, whether to retrofit, potentially even whether to knock down and start again. You know, that is a decision at one level of building. But the other thing is that this book, which you can normally get on the, it was published about 10 years ago, and it's more or less still up to date in most regards, but it's very good. You can get it for about £2 on a second-hand website. It's 2 parts, but I've got this and I found it very, very useful. So Green Building Bible Volumes 1 and 2.
Thank you. I'm going to, Tom Broughton had a question about super homes funding. There's lots of comments coming up in the chat box, but I noticed that there are also lots of people who are being very quiet and silent. So I would invite you to come forward, and all questions are welcome. However, you know, no question is too ignorant or too silly. So please come forward with your questions, whatever they may be. And if it helps, I'll come up with a couple of really basic questions, I'm sure, to just, you know, so that some of you who are here but maybe a little less inclined to ask questions, please do feel welcome, and all questions are welcome. So I'm handing over to Tom Broughton now, who has a question.
I think that question has already been answered by Sandra in the chat.
Great. Okay. Then we also have a question, a very big question in the chat from Alison. So Alison, do you want to put your question out for more public discussion? Again, about super homes and funding.
Yes, that sounds absolutely fantastic, because what I feel we're really lacking in Overton is a place that we can take people to show them this is how you can insulate walls internally or externally. This is what you do to make your old house breathable. You know, trying to actually physically show them what to do. So if there was a way that we could get a grant to do a home nearby, or I also love Kate's idea of having an eco homes register. I only know one person who's actually doing their house at the moment in Basingstoke, but that could work. And then we could video it, we could pass this information on. Because I'm running an eco group for there's a group of parish councillors from Basingstoke and Dean Borough, and everyone is really keen to do something, but it's really hard to know. Some of these problems just seem insurmountable, I think, at the moment. So if there was a way that we could all work on a project together, I'd love it if either of you could be a speaker and help us, because I feel we're doing a lot of talking and not a lot of action. I want to see some action.
Yeah, I think in the chat was, I can't remember when it was, but yes, I'd be very happy to be a speaker virtually. The super homes model, because it's a project that's been going a long time, and we've actually revamped it. But the model was it was very much about peer-to-peer learning and about people being able to visit each other's homes. That was very resource intensive for us, and there are already. I mean, at one point there were sort of like 222. Super homers, and most of them still got their details on the Super Homes website, which is superhomes.org.uk. So you can see a lot of details. I think going forward we might do more sort of more nationally. It will be sort of video fly-throughs that we might be trying to do. So building up case studies really on different types of retrofit. I think it's only on a more local level that there might be open homes, but I was certainly very interested to explore, you know, whether there might be any funding to do something around that with you. It'd be great. I absolutely love your enthusiasm. I've been involved in my own community group, and it's so easy for them, you know, to run out of energy. And like you're saying, it's a lot of effort. You do want to see some results. So be happy to try and help.
Excellent. Thank you, Sandra.
We've got lots of questions coming in now. Andrew Sweeney has a question. Then I think it was then Stuart, then John, then Councillor Mike Bush.
It was less of a question really. It was more just in response to what Ali said, just kind of sharing something that we'd recently done. We used Energy Overton, before I was part of it, used to do a green open homes event where people could actually walk around and do that peer-to-peer learning of looking at people who implemented technologies and external cladding on houses. We did one on heat pumps, and it was really successful. But with the pandemic, that was done a number of years ago, and we've recently done a virtual one, and we managed to get a local videographer to do all of that on a small budget. But I'm happy to share like the learning from that offline after the meeting and show you some of the videos that we produced that. But that was really resonated with local people, seeing them, how they'd done it, the cost, the kind of disruption to their homes and things like that. It was I'd say a good example of that peer-to-peer learning.
Andrew, could you put a link to that in the chat box? And also maybe we could put it on the CES YouTube channel.
Yeah, I can certainly, I'll send across all the details and then use that as and when they want.
So I think it was Stuart next, then John.
Yes, building on what John said there and previously what Ali said, I actually think from a technical perspective, there isn't a problem with the technology. There is a problem with the cost, obviously, and that is where, and my other point was going to be, really, we haven't mentioned EPC, energy performance certificates, at all, but for many people, they do act as a starting point. I mean, they have various other advantages. In fact, you can't even progress on certain things like renewable heat and so on without having an EPC in place. So should we be encouraging people in the first instance to have an EPC? They cost about 50, 60 quid, or do we think, is the collective view from a community energy perspective that actually they're not that useful, and this more sort of intimate engagement is actually more useful? I guess, are we advising people to have EPCs?
Does anyone want to answer that? I'm partly wondering actually if Chris Tuff wants to answer it, but Nick looks like Nikki and Chris want to answer it.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. Thanks very much for that last comment. I mean, in a way, it's a balance between, in your community, do you go for, you know, really quite extreme retrofitting, which we're kind of talking about, or do you go for making sure that everyone's got, you know, the loft insulation that they should have, and cavity wall insulation if it seems to be appropriate. So that's perhaps something, you know, to debate within your community, because, you know, this retrofitting we're talking about is difficult, expensive. Well, it's not difficult, but you have to have the right consultancy behind it, but it's certainly expensive for householders. And one other thing I wanted to mention that we haven't talked about, LAD funding, which is a route for lower income householders to really access this type of retrofitting.
Chris Tuff, do you have something to say on EPCs?
Yeah. You should always go straight away for the EPC. It's the most cheapest and effective way of getting a start. You can go around and around and around in circles trying to find something. But by finding someone who's local, which is what it's all about, who do these EPCs, you get an understanding from their advice, and then you can move on from that advice. It could be bad insulation if you've got a floating floor, for example. The drafts coming through floorboards, the concepts of your internal walls, your doors, most definitely a loft insulation, because that's where it all disappears. But to the lay person, they wouldn't know. They can only assume what they see on the news and social media. But encouragement to do EPCs is far better. You can actually, I'd imagine, having one of these, an EPC qualified officer, I'll call them officers, consultants, do on group. So they are actually, in fact, cheaper because they've got the continuing work to do, because they are very busy people. To try and get one coming tomorrow, you wouldn't. You have to book them up well in advance to come across. So if you had local people who are trained in that situation through funding, who would do it for the community, it's far better. Local authority housing. You can get your actual homes listed with the building control to come in to have a look at your own property. They have to fulfil all the obligations. And that's where poverty is. It's not just in private housing, it's also in council housing. We've seen this with damp arising, major local authorities falling foul of building control. So I really do think that the suggestion really of EPCs being done locally is a great advantage for everybody.
Thank you. I've slightly lost track of who was next. I think it was John, and then Councillor Mike Bush, and then Nick Owens.
Okay, thank you, Liz. I'm John Hubbard from Energy Alton, and I'm feeling slightly better this morning because I've realised that we've been energy champions all along, except we just didn't call ourselves that. But listening to Kate has encouraged me. My question or comment out there is sort of the challenging one, which is how to build to scale. Energy Alton's been doing a lot of these things for 10 years plus. And I'm very conscious that we still don't get to a large percentage of the population. We have green open homes events and we might get 100 people coming around those homes, but the population in Alton is about 20,000. We have been doing energy surveys over many years, but we are still only doing probably less than 100 a year. And so we have a big challenge amongst us, and it's a challenge to put out there, which is where is there examples where people are really able to engage on a greater mass level? Part of me says we must tie up with local authorities, and although we've got good relations with our local authorities, we haven't got anything like the degree of tie up in terms of resources, personnel, and initiatives that is needed. And I just feel that we're not really getting to it yet. But having said that, I wanted to, if you can indulge me, to wave in front of you something that Energy Alton is producing next week, which is a clean heat guide to Alton. And I mention it because it's had CES funding, amongst other funding, and this is going to be free to online and in print, and is being launched at our COP26 event next Friday. And this is about how the surveys of 5 exemplar homes in Alton, where we've looked at clean heat options, obviously in particular heat pumps, can be applied to the large percentage of homes in Alton regarding costs, installation, practicalities, and so forth. So that's something that we're doing to try and get out there to a wider range of people. But I do feel it's still a problem that we all have. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll hand over to Councillor Mike Bush, who's been very patiently waiting to speak for some time, and he might be able to answer some of your, I hope, your observations about working with local authorities.
Yeah, thank you, Liz, and thank you all. Well, contributions this morning. This is my first time for this group, and I found it so informative and gave me insights to all aspects in terms of energy management, as I call it, and control. Just to give you a quick, my professional background, all my life I've been involved with the built environment and in energy. And now I'm a retired services consultant, and my role predominantly now is working in the community in various groups. And as a tenured district councillor, I sit on the local plan and planning policy, which is in the process now. And we've had a tremendous amount of input, in particular to one of the SP policies regarding environment in new developments, new dwellings, to try to go the extra mile. A lot of our areas are rural, and a lot of areas are run on oil, and obviously this is not the future. So heat pumps, ground source, solar, thermal, all of those aspects are being viewed. But for me, fabric first has always been something that's stuck with me. It's, you know, sometimes we try to react after the event, and I've seen that in personal experiences with air source heat pumps into heavyweight buildings, which don't deliver, and they've got bad name in terms of reputation. And there's so many stories I could tell you about. I don't want to dwell on that particular issue. But I say, so we're actually shaping the policy for tendering rural at the moment, which is great. It's been approved by council. It's now gone to the inspectorate for adoption, and hopefully by the end of the year. And I work very closely with a lot of developers in this area, and I'm proud to say on some developments been close by to me that they were still trying to introduce gas. We've now got air source heat pumps, but also we've got very highly insulated buildings. The perspectives of the orientation of the building to ensure you're getting good sunlight, so even light introduced, LED lighting, some really good initiatives here, which are, you know, I'm working on. And at parish level, because we have a directive from the leader of the council with this net zero carbon, you know, it's almost on the agenda, or it is on the agenda for all the parishes throughout the area to have climate change and help and support in terms of initiatives that come through from directed down. But there's some very good people on our parishes that have got experience as builders. They're actually a part of this. So we are going in a really good direction. I think we're one of the only parishes now that's got about 6 or 7 lights that just got to be converted to LED. We're pretty LED now. So in terms of our energy bills have come down on our statutory costs that we face as parishes. But also we have village halls that are old. So we've got groups now that are looking and doing feasibility studies on the viability. Some got old oil heating, old colour gas heaters, very sort of insulation poor. So we're looking at different areas of funding. So I'd welcome anybody could help direct me in that parish level to sort of we can source some funding to improve the insulation and reduce the cost of these parish halls, which are struggling with the precept. But I say I've got a lot more to perhaps add on the next meeting. I don't know, I'm not quite sure how it's going to go. So that's really all for me at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you. To be honest, funding is, Henry, just I'll get to you in just a second, I think, after Nick, but I would like to add to that, that funding is a question that I wanted to ask of Kate, but she's had to go. So I will point us in the direction of Matt and see if Matt has anything to say about funding. And also, actually, I wonder if Michael Bevan, who is at CES and is an excellent fundraiser, has any comments or observations he could make about the funding and financing issues.
Sorry, who's speaking next?
Yeah,
either Matt or Michael.
Oh, I think, is it Nick yet next then?
Well, I just wondered if Matt or Michael have any observations to make about this funding issue.
There is funding out there for multiple different types of retrofit. It's more, I'm not an expert when it comes to the community buildings as such. Mike was looking to do, but I'm sure there is stuff out there for things like that. But like I alluded to earlier, the government is now starting to act on what they've been promising for years in moving towards net zero with the multiple different grant schemes that are coming out. We had Green Home Grant voucher scheme, which didn't go as the plan as they would have hoped, launched last year. There was two facets to that. There was the voucher scheme, which was open to all, and that included able to pay households as well. You still had to pay a percentage of the total cost of the install, but there was still grants incentivizing retrofit. And there is the LAD funding, which is obviously aimed at low income households, and that's a fully funded grant scheme of up to £10,000 per property. So there is things coming out. There's the home upgrade grant next year targeting off gas properties, and that's £10,000 to £15,000 for properties that are off gas to benefit from. So it's a kind of watch this space type scenario, because they have committed to net zero and they need a vehicle to reach that, and the only way to do that with the sort of scale of the issue we have is to throw hundreds of millions of pounds at it. The supply chain is struggling at the moment. They're creaking because they're in high demand all over the place, trying to deal with these contracts that are being rolled out, but they're getting there, and they're starting to now upscale what they're doing, so it's trying to keep your sort of ear to the ground and listening to what is there and what's coming out. The only caveat to that is I would say is that things are happening differently in different areas, different approaches. Local authorities are involved, so you will get different managing agents. So there's almost not a one route into this, because you can't, you're better off approaching local authorities, seeing what they're doing, seeing what they've advertised, especially in terms of the Green Homes Grant. But yeah, if that's useful.
And I'll just add in briefly about on the fundraising side. So again, there's two things. So one is there's funding about decarbonisation, which Matt talked about. The other thing also is that sometimes if you're talking about decarbonising actually is actually possibly about making a building more usable. So if you've got a community building and there is a clear purpose for that, then potentially you can be looking at funders who will be interested in the purpose of the building. And actually what you're doing is you're saying we're reducing our costs and we're making the building more comfortable for people to use and the rest of it, and decarbonising at the same time. So your focus on the use rather than necessarily the carbon. And the other thing also is that community energy groups there's no reason why community energy groups need to only focus on building renewable energy. They can also be focused about retrofitting and reducing carbon. If the difficulty is it's expensive work, it takes a long time to pay back, but there are people who are looking at it, and I suspect probably within a couple of years there'll be organisations who will be basically saying, if you want to decarbonise but you haven't got the funding, maybe community energy organisation can help you, and we'll, in the same way as we do a PPA, we'll do a energy saving share or something. But I don't know who's doing it yet.
Thank you, Michael. Right, I'll hand over to Nick, and then we've got 6 minutes left. And just, I'll hand over to Nick. I think Henry had a question, but I'd really like to hear from another woman, because you women have gone very quiet. So I don't know if it's just because it's all sort of building talk or something, but the women have gone a bit quiet. So I'll hand over to Nick, then Henry, then Dinah, and then we'll probably be out of time. But if any other women have something to say, put your hand up quickly.
Okay, thank you very much, Liz. So I'm associated with several community energy groups, and at the moment, none of them employ a retrofit coordinator. I know there are lots of householders out there who don't know what to do and what their first step should be in saving energy. And I think the best route probably is going to be to have a retrofit coordinator prepare you a proper retrofit plan so that you know what the steps are that you could take and the order you should be doing them in. And that then means you're not trying to redo or undo something you did earlier. So if there were funding for community groups to train up retrofit coordinators, I think that would be a really good move, and it would have quite a multiplier effect in terms of generating energy savings. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. I think it's Henry, then Dinah.
Okay, sorry, I'll be very quick, and it's just two thoughts that have sort of occurred during the discussion, and it may be that that Matt Neal can perhaps put them into context, or others. One is about energy champions and how they can contribute to the construction industry in an area, or builders in the area, so that new buildings go up, perhaps can benefit from the experience of energy champions. And the other is about links with universities that are doing research into retrofitting and new building and energy saving. And apart from that, the only other question I've got is, can I be an energy champion?
Where are you based, Henry?
Brockenhurst.
Brockenhurst.
In the New Forest.
Is there anyone else here from Brockenhurst? Well, I suggest you liaise with Michael, because he will know what's happening in Brockenhurst.
Thank you.
Dinah.
Yeah, a few things. I mean, I'm thinking of the role of the councils with the idea of, you know, if your council has declared a climate emergency, there's three things that I'm thinking of. One, if they would be able to help with energy surveys. The other thing, if energy champions could feed back into the planning departments, because there's no points or any kind of incentives to make new buildings build with less embodied carbon materials. And there's a huge deficit of knowledge and practical application within the council's planning department about pushing better quality materials. And the third thing is, we've just been visited by the Chamber of Commerce, who would like us to help advise them on their members' shops and businesses. And we'd love to do it, but we don't have the expertise and haven't got the first idea of where to start. So that's it.
Thank you, Dinah. Dinah, I suggest you liaise with Nick Owens, because he is nearby and may be able to help you out on some of that. It's 11:30. I think we've had a very, very, very dense debate, actually, and I hope that you will have found it helpful, all of you participants. I hope you will be taking away more information than you will have questions. I hope you'll take away some useful things rather than just be left with more questions. That's what I'm trying to say. There's loads and loads of links and things in the chat box. So if you don't already know how to do this, I suggest you save the chat box, and to do that, where the bit where it says type message here, top right hand bit of that bit, there's three little dots. If you click on those three little dots, you can save the chat. That will save it to your computer, and you'll have access to all those links that people have shared, which should be helpful to you. And with that, I just want to thank our speakers. Yes.
I was just going to say, it's worth mentioning that that puts it in a directory under Zoom. So if you can't find it, it's under a Zoom directory, which Zoom has created for you.
That's right, in a long list that you can't quite find because the numbers look really weird. I think it's the American date format. Yeah, thank you for that, Stuart. So anyway, thank you very much, everyone. I hope you found it helpful. Do link up with each other, swap emails, and we will see you next month. And let us know if you have any other, if there's anything else you want from us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Many thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks for coming, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Next time. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye. Claire, I look forward to meeting you tomorrow. Oh, she's gone. Oh, no, she's not. She's still there. Claire, I look forward to meeting you tomorrow. And Chris, do you want me to... Yes.
Liz, can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
My neighbour disappearing. Maybe for the future sessions you may do, looking at community-led housing.
Okay.
With respect to sustainable energy.
You may have to elaborate because my head's slightly fried at the moment.
Okay, I'll send you an email.
Yeah, all right, do that. And also because I need to introduce you to Gravitricity.
Oh, okay, yes. I'll send you in details, everything for you anyway.
Okay.
All right, Liz.
All right,
thank
lovely.
you.
Thanks, Chris. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Oh, Liz, do you want to stop recording?
Oh, good idea.
Bye.
Edit it before